scripting, because we're going to kind of go into the technical lesson, but this is all about just finding good source images, kind of the lead up to the instructions that I have supplied you all. So I sent 4 different, what they're kind of like texture swatch websites. These are primarily used for 3-dimensional renderings. And so you'll see these have spheres, but they also, when we do download these files, you'll see they kind of have some other information that 3D modeling softwares will use to kind of adjust lighting and textures of objects. Some of them are for video games, but others are for architectural renderings. I find that I feel the most limited by this architectural rendering, despite the high quality. It's all just, building textures. And so when we're working in the landscape, I find this limiting, especially when we're working on renderings, compared to these that have a little bit more kind of natural textures. So what I use these sites for is to often find the ground textures, wall textures, and any other elements. And this proved to be so valuable when I was making 3-dimensional or like 3D models and then trying to set them in the landscape. They kept looking really smooth and kind of too computerized. But as I started just throwing like textures on them, even when I really severely lowered the opacity of the textures, just that little bit of texture added to an object can really help it feel a little bit more real in the real world. So I think collectively we've probably have from like 3,000 to 4,000 textures here that are all free. There's probably other sites. This site is nice because they also supply 3D models that I believe I've used some of their rock models and stump models in Rhino for trying to get those really difficult to actually make kind of organic shapes. So I supplied these, but I also supplied, and this is not really particular for this assignment, but let's see, in Entourage, the Entourage folder in Canvas, I supplied you with nearly all of the Entourage that I kept with me and kind of accumulated from other folks throughout my education. So if you download these, there's PNG, like already cut out grasses and plants, trees, some ground textures that are really nice to use, all like quality PNGs for rendering. So feel free to use those and download them. And there used to be kind of like an old tradition of passing the like class flash drive on to the next class. We don't do that anymore, unfortunately. So, but be generous with these and carry them on if you wish to do so, because it can be hard to find high quality grass PNGs, for example. Okay. So the 3 tools that I often use to find high quality source images are these texture resources here, and then regular Google and Flickr. Flickr is a lot like Google. But there's a lot of images that are just ready to use, and you're able to, if you're worried about licensing, which we shouldn't as students, especially making renderings, but you can kind of adjust the licensing. And if you find a good photographer or they'll often upload these photos at super high resolutions. And you'll often, sometimes they'll lock them, but so like the original photo here is big enough for us to use in Photoshop and be able to kind of have some room to expand it without really having to worry about lowering the quality of the image. And so highly recommend exploring what Flickr has to offer. Oh, fantastic. So we can also, here in the advanced filter, we're able to adjust the minimum size of the photos. So that's another tool that we'll explore in Google, but this will allow us to right away kind of skip the issues of having really low quality images and trying to add as many filters as we can to kind of decrease that pixelation or noise. And we can just go straight for those high quality images. So we can have a good starting point for our renderings. So for this assignment, we're going to find 8 to 10 textures. They don't all have to be from the texture websites that I shared. I already downloaded a few just to kind of get a head start because it's a little monotonous if you watch me have to search for all of them. Part of that is finding a nice sky. So we're going to make kind of a two-dimensional rendering. And so I'm going to start downloading the images that I think I'll need for this rendering. And while you all watch this, you'll start to get an idea of what to look for. Yeah, so I'll just go, this looks really lovely. Maybe the mountains will look cool in the little rendering that I'm making. It's a little small. Oh, there's the original, it's really big. So for this assignment, perfect. For this assignment, you can go the studio route, or you can make your own section. And so you'll see, I'm going to kind of have some fun with my section. But for the folks that want to take this a little bit more seriously, you can go ahead and do that. And I'll show you another couple places that you can kind of go in that direction. And so we can also use Google for finding things. And so I think maybe we'll find nice kind of just gold. I don't know how it's going to look in the actual rendering, but when we look up an image in Google, you can go to Tools, Size, Large. And again, if you're worried about your usage rights, you can adjust those, but we don't need to worry about that as students. We can also click around with the type, but I find that it doesn't often create any issues, so I don't really play around with that. And so this tool in particular is just great for just quickly getting those high quality images. So as I look at this, I'm thinking that I'm just going to go with, I'm going to go with just the textures for now. Let's see, WEBP shouldn't be an issue. Going to go to week 3 and put it in our source files because this is going to be a source file. Oops. And then I'm going to download one more just in case that so I know Illustrator opens WEBP files with no issue, but I'm not sure if Photoshop does. I'll have to double check that. This will be fun. Fantastic. Okay. So going back to these texture sites, I want to get so I want to get we're doing a cross section of soil. So I want to get a nice sample of like topsoil. So I don't see that they don't have a soil, but they do have dirt. This looks good. So all these sites kind of have the same kind of way of downloading. You can see that there's two different ways or file formats. I tend to go with the PNG. It's just so every time you send a JPG on the internet or upload it and download it, the computer is computer is essentially breaking down the image and then recreating it. And every time it does that, you lose a little bit of quality in your image. But you don't really get that with the PNG. And so I like to go with the PNG. And we're not making a huge, poster size rendering. So we can always keep it on the low end at maybe 2K. We might even be able to get away with 1K PNG, but I've got some space on my computer. Okay, so I downloaded that, and I'll download one other fun. Actually, yeah, I'll download one more fun texture. Let's try a different site though. Let's try, yeah, do sci-fi. Okay. So we'll download that. And these have probably gone to, I'm just gonna cut, bring it back to here. So I have my source images all there. So when you download from these sites, you need to extract them and unzip them. So it's perfect. When you do that, you'll see that they give you all different types of information for that texture swatch. These are all for when you're like using Photoshop, or if you're using Rhino, for example. It just helps with the textures, the bit mapping, and kind of the shading of the object. But we only need to worry about the PNG image. That's all we need to use. Let's double check that this file down here, the Unity, they changed the way that you can unzip, or they changed the way the file looks. Oh, perfect. So we go in more in Bridge, we can just look at the dimensions. So this was a 2000K PNG, and you can see that's 28 by 28, a little bit more inches. So that's a huge, when we bring that into Photoshop, it'll be giant, and we can have a lot of freedom to move around within that. You can check one of these images too and just see what the size may be. So that's very small in comparison. So it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. So that's just the quick primer on finding and kind of understanding kind of quality images, quality source files. I'm going to stop recording, and then we're going to adjust to the week 3 instructions. So we'll stop. Do you have any questions while we're transitioning? So some of you had wished to kind of get a little bit more of an understanding about different workflows. So we're going to go through a very quick workflow for this assignment, going from Illustrator to Photoshop, kind of flexing the skills of each software. So for this assignment, I'm asking for 8 to 10 source images. I think I should have downloaded enough. And then separately, one entourage. We're going to place a person into our rendering. And so I can show you on Canvas. So for week 3, for the folks that don't want to do a studio, I have a PNG or a JPEG source that you can use for this assignment. And then if you want to kind of push yourself a little bit, I also uploaded, let's see. So essentially, we're going to draw the outlines of a cross section and then fill in those outlines with textures. And so I found a couple cross sections of one of this volcano in the Canary Islands, and then another of, I think, all the kind of Canary Islands. So if that is beneficial to like the studio, that was the best I could find for cross sections. You're more than welcome to explore that through this assignment. Okay. So in Bridge, we are going to, or actually, let's start with Adobe Illustrator. And we're going to create a new file. We want our
Hey, Eve,
file. Yeah.
are you supposed to be sharing your screen right now?
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Sorry.
No, that's perfect. Okay. Here in week 3, just a quick refresher, or just jumping back to it quick. I have week 3 instructions, the hotkeys, and then the geo sections are for the folks that are just kind of exploring this without working on Studio. And then for the folks that do want to work on Studio, I have one example here is this cross section of one of the volcanoes of the Canary Islands that you can kind of start with as a source image and work off of if that is beneficial to your project at all. Okay, thank you for pointing that out. I was sharing my screen during the whole texture talk, right?
Yes, you were.
Oh, good. Okay, perfect. Okay. Okay, so in Adobe Illustrator, we're going to create a new file. So let's see. Going to close a few of these. Start anew. Okay. Up here in the top left corner, I already have one set for 11 by 17. We want the width to be 17, height to be 11. Make sure that orientation is correct. Just one artboard, and all the default settings should be okay. We'll create that. And once this is open, we hopefully you've already downloaded the files from the Canvas site. So I'm going to use this geo section for this assignment. I'm going to drop that in. And then I'm also going to go grab the hotkey cheat sheet, because I did not start with best practices, unfortunately. We'll click and bring that in as well. I'll just put that in the corner. So the cheat sheet, we don't really want it to, well, you can even, more contrast over here. We don't want to be editing it at all. So we're going to lock it by doing Control-2. And so now that layer is locked. And then our section, we are going to increase the size. We're going to start by trying to keep that size proportional to itself. So hold Shift while you expand your image. And this doesn't have to be exact. I'm going to say this is perfect for me. When you're done moving, you press V to go to the general, what's it called, the selection tool. And this is a perfect starting point for starting to draw outlines. And so your source image may look different if you take a different sample, but all the rest from here on out is going to be the same techniques. So we're going to lock this layer as well. And we're going to use that pen tool. I always like to just double check in the properties window. Before we do that, let's save. Super important. So I'm going to do this assignment 3. I'm going to make sure there's no fill, and I'm going to bring this up to 2 points, just so that we can kind of all see what we're working with here. And essentially, this is going to get a little redundant, but we're going to just press P, get the pen tool out, and just start drawing lines that outline all the different layers of our soil transect. So for the straight lines, you don't have to do anything special, but then when you start to get to curves, all you have to do is just when you click a new anchor point, when you drag, you can start to adjust the curvature of your line to sort of go along with the soil line on the source image. And this doesn't have to be totally perfect. but should kind of be reminiscent of that original photo. And when you get done with those lines, you just press escape, and that lets you kind of start anew. So I had already created, or I've already done this, so I'm going to kind of do 2 more layers just to show you kind of the last step in Illustrator, and then we can just jump right over to Photoshop. Got that straight line there. So I think one kind of interesting spot for here, or for this soil layer sample, is we've got cool layers that kind of jump in and out. And so how I would, there's several ways to probably go around this, but how I like to do this is I kind of just draw my lines and let them go over and kind of overlap each other. And then press the plus or equal sign will give us the anchor point tool. And we can just create little anchor points at, double check that. Z to zoom in. Let's double check that we're selecting that line. There we go. So create little anchor points at kind of those intersections. And so I'm pressing space to get the hand tool to allow me to move throughout the artboard as I'm zoomed in. And let's see, yeah, the selection tool, and plus again to add that anchor point. And then you go back to the selection tool, which is A. And so now we've kind of created this extra anchor point, and we have this little appendage that we can remove. So we can select the anchor point on the furthest end and just press delete. And now we have that clean line, which is going to be clean enough for what we're going to be doing for today. So again, select and delete. So essentially, we will outline all the different layers, which once you kind of get in the groove shouldn't take too long. We can go to our locked layers and delete them. And what you should end up with is something that looks like this. So we're gonna export as, and I'm just gonna go through the steps and then hit cancel, but when you're doing this, go all the way through. I'm gonna put this in my source files, and I'm gonna name it Geo Outline. This is a very important step. So when you're in this export window, select Use Artboards. What that does is it'll crop the export to the size of our canvas. So if you hadn't pressed that, if you had any lines that were going off your canvas, Illustrator would adjust the whole crop so that it would kind of allow those pieces to be part of the image. So by selecting Use Artboard, we're able to keep our image at 11 by 17. And then finally, when I hit export, when we're in the file type PNG, which allows us to have our image be transparent. And 300 DPI is maybe a little too high, but if it's not transparent, check that you're in the file PNG or file type PNG, and then if you have this window and it's still not transparent, you can go here and you can actually, possible that your background color is white, and you can change and adjust that as needed. So you press OK and export that, and go to Bridge and find your image that you just exported. Right click it, open with Adobe Photoshop. And for the actually for the sake of this assignment, you don't need to export it with transparency, but that's a good tool to know that exists when you're doing future renders. Perfect. So the first thing we're going to do is Control J, or we're going to do Control J, and that's going to create a duplicate of our image in Photoshop. If you kind of are nervous that you maybe didn't export correctly, you can see here on the right side that we have the canvas size is 11 by 17. So we were able to crop that image to 11 by 17 and retain those dimensions. So we hit Control J to duplicate our layer. Layer 1, we're going to rename by double clicking at layer 1. We'll name that top layer. And then we're going to go back to Bridge, and we're going to look for our first layer that we want to have in our soil. We're just going to click and drag that, drop that straight into Photoshop. Oops. Okay, I don't know what I did there. Let's try that again. Oh, I pressed escape. Perfect. Okay. So we're gonna go here and double check that we have our smart object. So for the first term, we talked about this a little bit, deconstruct. Now I'm forgetting the exact word, but essentially we want to avoid permanently editing the original photo as much as possible. And someone must know the word. So if you do know the word, please speak up. But this little icon here.
Destructive editing.
Thank you. Destructive editing. This little icon here means that we're working with a smart object. And I believe it's a default now for smart objects to be turned on, but if it's not, right click on that layer and convert your image to a smart object. This doesn't matter as much for this assignment, but as we start making things a little bit more complicated, that's going to be a really important setting to have turned on. Okay, so we have our first layer. I'm going to bring top layer over it. I'm going to lower the opacity just a little bit. And I'm going to expand this for right now. Okay. So this texture is really giving me kind of like bedrock vibes. So we're going to make sure that we have that top layer selected. And we're going to hit, let's see, the W tool, which is wand. So the wand tool is kind of the most fast, kind of rudimentary selection tools, which often doesn't work when we're trying to select things for making entourage because the color differences are so complicated. But for our black and white image, this is perfect. And so we're gonna select the layer that we want to assign the image that we have to. And then while that's selected, we're going to press our rock image, bedrock image, and we'll press this mask here, layer mask. So that'll cut right through and fill in that layer with our background image. And so essentially, what we'll be doing for this class is kind of creating this two-dimensional cross-section, kind of just coloring in the pieces. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Let's see. Okay, so I just so you all know what I just did. I guess, selected like a minuscule pixel in this image. And to deselect it, I did Control D. Turn on transform controls again. Make that size a little bit bigger. In Photoshop, we don't have to press Shift to uniformly change the size of things. So for this cool layer that I like that kind of hops in and out, when we use the wand tool, you can only select one thing unless you press Shift, which adds a little plus sign at the cursor of your wand and allows you to kind of select all the different layers that you want it to go on. And if you accidentally select the wrong one, press Alt and select the selection and it'll deselect for you. So we'll do the same thing. We have our top layer active while we're using the wand tool. Then we'll go to the image that we want to have as our layer and create a layer mask. And as you can see, this part is pretty repetitive. And so I won't have you sit through me filling this up all the way, but I'll just kind of quick make this sort of look like a bit of a rendering, just so that kind of have an idea of what we're shooting for.
So Ian, if I can understand correctly, you exported the Illustrator file as a PNG, and then you
Correct.
brought that into Photoshop.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, and then you're using the wand tool to select the white space that is bordered by the lines that you drew.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. So we're going to just do that again. And we're starting to kind of construct a very like rudimentary cross-section, almost two-dimensional rendering. If you're feeling ambitious, you're more than welcome to kind of change the scale of their textures so they kind of feel a little bit more real. And then before I jump to the entourage, I'm just going to give my entourage some solid ground to stand on. Yes, we got this texture. Okay. So for this assignment, for entourage, I'd love to have us avoid using the non-Scandinavia. So if you have a picture of yourself that you feel comfortable using, or a picture of Peter or other friends that you might have, please use them. And this can be as serious or as silly as you really wish. I have this picture of these folks running. Oops. I'm up there. And then press Z to get that magnification. So you'll notice I picked these folks because the lighting here is fairly washed out, or not, opposite of washed out, sorry. There's no harsh shadows, no harsh sunlight. They should be able to kind of blend into whatever kind of like weird liminal space that I'm creating for them in Photoshop. And so we're gonna press L to make a lasso tool. Folks that have been in the first term, you should be very familiar with these tools and how to use them. So if you aren't, I have a video that I can repost. It's on the channel, how to use the lasso tool and how to cut out entourage. When we press L and we have our lasso tool open, I believe if we press Shift and L, we can cycle through the different lasso tools. And for this kind of rough cut right now, I'm just gonna use the polygon lasso tool. And cut out these runners. So again, you can make this look as like real as you want or not. And on Thursday, we will talk about kind of how to add more textures to this, kind of some finishing touches that you can use to kind of help things kind of blend in. And also talk a little bit more about like source imagery. So once I have these people selected, I'm just going to do that mask tool again. Sweet. And now we have them running on the beautiful cross section. So if I were to fill in these extra layers of soil, this would be considered kind of that finished assignment 3. So stick with this for now. Don't push yourself unnecessarily, and we'll be able to revisit this on Thursday. So if you get some time to work on it now, hopefully you can come with some questions on Thursday. And then for the finished export, y'all have shown that you know how to export, but I'd also like to see, oops. I want to see those layers again. It's always, we used to, for my other Photoshop classes, actually, instead of submitting an export, we would submit the entire Photoshop file, and the professor would go through every file just to make sure we're using best practices. I think I can tell through the layer screenshots. So for the final assignment, I'd like to see the exported image and then a screenshot of your layers again. I'm trying to keep things fairly organized. Any questions?